Okay, I think I'll just start. I think we have a speaker on the way here. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for coming in after the lunch break. I'm Kelvin Wong. Perhaps I should stand so you can see me. I'm Kelvin Wong from ICANN APAC Hub. I'm based out of the Singapore office in ICANN, Singapore office. And what APAC Hub does is that we help to oversee the activities in the APAC region. We have the hub is in Singapore office, but we have some staff around the region as well. Okay. Without further ado, I'll just jump straight into the workshop. The workshop today is, if you don't mind, I'll just sit down. It's overcoming challenges in APAC outreach and participation in the new internet era. So the idea for this workshop really is to get everyone's input on the on some of the challenges that you see, because I believe most of you are participants or organizers of global or regional or even local internet governance conferences or meetings in your own communities. And so we want to hear from you on what are some of the challenges that you face in engaging in global organizations like ICANN and perhaps ISOC and different organizations, that because we make use of different platforms, systems, tools that is good in their own ways, but may have certain restrictions in different economies, and and you may face certain difficulties, be it because of where you are, what you speak, or your beliefs in terms of culture, so to speak. So I will let my co-facilitator, Adam, here to elaborate a bit more. But before that, let me introduce to you the speakers for today. Okay. As you can see, I think that you can see the label. I'll not go into the bio in detail because they are all in the website. We have Ms. Ankitas from Facebook, Mr. Goh Li Shin, who I'm sure is rushing finding the venue, Hong Xue from Beijing Normal University, Rajnesh from ISOC APAC Bureau, and Joyce Cheng, my colleague from ICANN. And let me pass the mic to Adam Pig.
There's an aiming trick involved in that. Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Adam Peake. I also work for ICANN. I'm not part of the Singapore office. I work for the Global Engagement Group, and I'm responsible for civil society engagement and also working with academia. But I've been in this region for many years, living in Tokyo since around 1989, I think. So it's very good to be here at the meeting. So we're talking about some of the challenges that we have from this region in participating in various internet governance processes, whether they be local, regional, or global processes that we're thinking about. And I think historically we've felt that a lot of the discussions have been weighted towards North America and Europe. This is certainly changing, but again, statistics seem to show that in most processes it will be oriented towards the developed North. We have 3.3 billion internet users, and many of these are from the Asia-Pacific region, and it's anticipated that many of the next billion, which we talk about very much in the Internet Governance Forum, will also be coming from the Asia-Pacific region. But it's a region with challenges for outreach. There's a great diversity of languages, and again, in many of the internet governance type of processes, we will stick to translation around or interpretation around the United Nations languages, which means that Chinese is available, but not necessarily other languages from the region. So there are challenges of communication, both internally within the region, but also across into the international processes. It's an extraordinary geography. If you think that I'm thinking about how I get to an ICANN meeting in Hyderabad from Tokyo, that's a 9-hour flight. Which, if you're thinking of Europe across to the North America region, this is internal within our region. People traveling from the Pacific and having to island hop and taking a day and a half or 2 days to get to meetings. From anyone from Australia traveling up into the north is going to be an extremely difficult journey, and it's just long, long distances and a difficult geography to get around. It's also a diverse culture in terms of economic development, from some of the world's poorest and probably a majority of the world's poor to some extremely wealthy and developed countries. So there's a diversity which is also a part of this challenge. A very simple thing might be something like the availability of bandwidth that comes with a diversity of economies. Perhaps if you don't have a particularly rich broadband nature, then all of the streaming services that we make available are not the sort of thing that you really want. Perhaps you're a world of download. And so trying to put that into context, that we may wish to look at something that is, what are the services that suit us because of this? How much awareness is there, interest, and the imperative to use these, to be involved and to want to be involved? Are livelihood issues still more important to many people rather than the internet policies and internet governance issues that we're talking about? But the last point is, yes, things are changing. We are seeing a lot of participation, increasing participation from the Asia Pacific. One specific example from ICANN is the recent transition where I think it was something like 26% of the participants in the IANA transition processes, and that includes all of the work that went on there from the IANA transition itself through the accountability work. About 26% of participants were from the APAC region, which is a good number. It's 1/4, so not so bad at all. And we something like there were about 1,100 events of various types, either online webinars or face-to-face meetings, 1,100 events, and about 180 of those took place or were organized again in this region, which is a good number. So things, as we say, are changing, and we are seeing a greater, an increasing amount of participation from the region. But there are definitely still challenges. Could you flick to the next one? So we've spoken about some of them, about the issues of engagement. One of the one that stands out, and this again, if we just talk about an example from ICANN, this session is not meant to be about ICANN, but an example that we do face is that when we're doing online collaboration, we use a lot of Google Docs. Google Docs are extremely useful. We can do a lot of editing, yet they're not available for people in China and some parts of the region. How do we get around that? ICANN tries very hard to be as inclusive as possible, to outreach as much as we can, and yet it's very difficult to find alternatives to that. I even found recently that we try and we had a sign-up sheet to how do you get involved with certain working groups, and at the bottom of the sign-up sheet was a CAPTCHA, one of those things that proves you're not a robot. Unfortunately, that was provided by Google. Which meant that, again, so these things sort of sneak into, the services and platforms that we're trying to provide. All of our meeting photographs are on Flickr, which, again, is not available in China. So I'm not trying to be critical about our organization. I'm saying that we put a lot of effort into this, and yet we face these barriers. So how do we overcome them? And not thinking about ICANN specifically, but how do we all try and overcome these barriers? I also mentioned the idea of downloading a lot of services. As we're using here today, we have an Adobe Connect, which is ongoing. There are no regional restrictions on Adobe. Yet, if you want to look at it, then streaming services, when it's not live, if you want to look at an archive service, then streaming is extremely hard to follow. A little bit like using YouTube. Some people may wish to have downloadable services. Are there particular formats for meetings that suit a region? Where culturally people talk about standing at a long microphone queue is not particularly attractive to some cultures, where there's not the level of confidence or even experience in standing and talking at a mic. I come from Japan, where everybody loves microphones and sings karaoke whenever the opportunity arises, but not necessarily when they're talking about their work, but they are very familiar with the microphone at least. But there are cultural barriers to this. One of the things we look at is time zones. Working internationally, if we begin at the west coast of the United States, simply because that's 6 a.m. in Los Angeles will be the middle of the day in Europe, and will be the end of the day or beyond midnight if you get over into the Western Pacific. So how do you hold meetings globally across a region, when you have this sort of element of time zones involved? Do you make it uncomfortable for somebody so that they have to get up at 4 a.m. on a rotation basis? Or do you try and stick to some golden hours? I spend most of my time on the phone at 10 p.m., 11 p.m. and midnight. There's also just general capacity in education. All of these are issues that we have the Asia Pacific Leaders Program yesterday. There's various summer schools, not summer schools, internet governance schools that are coming up. So these are all the sorts of issues we're looking at. And it's really seeking your advice on what should we be using and what can we be using to make participation easier and more effective. That's really the purpose of what we're trying to achieve today. So, thank you.
Okay, so this is what's going to happen. We're going to try something newer. So instead of hearing us speak all the time, we're going to make everyone sort of do the work as well. So we are at 1. We have done a bit of a context setting so you know what you're up for. Number 2, we'll invite some initial comments by our panelists. We have Hong Xue and Anki. I've introduced them earlier. They will give short comments. And then we're going to break out into 3 groups. I've already asked the organizers to lock the door so you can't go out now. So you are going to be divided into 3 groups. We will have Raj, Li Xun, and Joyce lead the 3 groups. What we really need is input from you on some of the things that we mentioned. Basically, we really want to hear from you, from your organization, from your country, what are the challenges that you have faced, and even better, the mitigation measures that you have taken, things that work to sort of work around some restrictions or to make new ways of thinking, new formats of getting people engaged. So all these are very welcome, and we will have to invite our panelists to round up some of this discussion in 30 minutes and make a presentation at the end. So all these, hopefully, we hope to compile them into sort of a list or a document of sorts, just so that, of course, we had to come up with a workshop sort of a report from this, from all the workshops. But hopefully, these inputs from yourself will go into the sort of document that will be useful for people who may be wanting to conduct outreach in APAC. But it's not familiar with our region, for example, and then looking at the list, they will know what are some of the challenges and restrictions, or some of the pitfalls, some of the things that they should avoid doing, some of the things that have worked well in different economies. So, on that note, I will invite Hong Xue to, before that, the 3 groups, I will flash this out again, don't worry, will be like this. We will divide you into sub-theme A, B, and C so that we have a sort of a diversity of views as well. And these are some of the questions that you can ask yourselves and that the moderators, I guess, will also ask you. I'll leave this on the screen and I will invite Hong to give us her initial comments.
Well, thank you, Kelvin. Thank you very much. I guess Adam has already given a very comprehensive and thoughtful overview with respect to all kinds of challenges facing to the outreach and the participation, the governance activities in Asia Pacific. I fully agree that this region is extremely big. Its geographical wideness makes people difficult to participate all the meetings or conferences, the events physically in person. So they heavily rely on this remote participation, and this technological difficulty should never be undermined. I won't repeat what is being said so briefly. I want to emphasize from 2 perspectives as an ordinary internet, individual internet user. The first one is culture, the second one is language. Well, I'm very proud to say that for this panel, at least, we have gender balance. We're going to issue a good gender card. That's great. And we see this very promising situation in Asia Pacific. There's a female participants from our community has been very active and very capable, and is and so participative and contribute a lot, especially to the ICANN community. And in a large community, we see these so many capable female leaders. Maureen, look at me while you look at your screen. right, yes. All right. So this is a great achievement. We must emphasize the importance, and we hope there will be more young girls, well, this next generation, the young ladies, to join this ICANN community and the internet community to be volunteers, to be leaders. For the culture, there's a couple of challenging things. I fully agree with Adam. I know ICANN is reforming its meeting format. We will see what will happen in Hyderabad. And I heard that it won't be a very big room, open public forum. There won't be bloody microphone again. There will be more peaceful, small group meetings to enable people to talk more comfortably and confidently at a not so much open mic as a rotating mic. And I guess that's very good initiative. That's very much culturally friendly to Asia Pacific people because it's very challenging for us to go to a microphone, especially to debate openly. This is absolutely not a culture, at least in East Asia. There's a couple of other culture issues. For example, normally people don't debate very openly. We would say very politely. We try to reach consensus. So in the policy making process, possibly this Asia Pacific part has become more quiet. It doesn't mean people all agree with the things. It just people do not want to look like controversial or challenging to the others. So how to enable these people to voice their will, that would be a challenging thing. Let me move on to language issue. As a non-English speaker, it's been challenging me all through these years. I must say ICANN has made tremendous achievements to enable non-English speaker to participate more comfortably and effectively. I want to congratulate the great achievement made with respect to translations and interpretations. I know that the non-English speaker is now being able to participate in all 4 areas, from listening, speaking, reading, and even writing. This is a very big achievement, and at least for Chinese community in Asia Pacific, we feel we're very privileged. The document translation has been very timely and comprehensive. For example, the recent IANA transition document and accountability reform documents, the 300-page documents were translated in all 6 UN languages very, very quickly. That's very, very useful for the Chinese community to have the discussion, have community events immediately. So we appreciate this contribution from ICANN. But we note that there's many other languages, and especially small language community, they don't have the privilege to access the ICANN translation services. So I suggest probably we use the old model, that's the community volunteers, whether this community voluntary translation could help for those small language communities. Another point is the interpretation. This is very important for effective participation. I know that for the face-to-face meeting, ICANN is provide, at least for the local community, the simultaneous interpretation to enable people to speak in local language. This is very, very helpful for the people in the local community. But for the conference calls, this is challenging. I know that for Asia Pacific conference calls, normally ICANN can provide the Chinese translation at phone bridge. But I know the interesting phenomenon that so far no one from Chinese community has ever used that service. it seems the phone bridge translation is costly, and whether this is a good method to enable the non-English speaker to speak, right? I know this different. This is a culture saying for the Spanish translation on the phone bridge. This being used, or the French translations being used. But for Chinese, nobody's actually used that. This is sad. Especially with limited resources. So how to enable people to more effectively participate this remote participation facilities. I assume the Adobe Run is quite useful. It's not only this phone bridge translation, especially the tapping and the chatting through the virtual room facility that's more effective probably. So this is my rough thinking. Finally, I want to go back to the document drafting, the policy-making process. This is the most difficult things for non-English speaker to participate. What you think about? That's really, you have to be able to work in that language. You have to be able to think in that language. The translation or interpretation won't work actually. So that I hope we could have some solution to overcome that most difficult part. How to make these people possibly, first of all, group up and draft in local language, and then submit it in English to the bigger community. That's my thinking. Otherwise, I guess these people will be passive recipient. They won't be able to proactively drafting this policy documents. Well, okay. Oh, thank you very much. I guess I should pass on.
Thank you very much, Wong. Can I pass the mic to Anki?
Thank you. On the language point, I'll just sort of bring in the South Asia perspective. And also when we talk of the Asia-Pacific region, I think it's very important to understand everybody understands this, but it's just not the language and cultural diversity, but also the socioeconomic diversity, which is there in this region, both from a perspective of values, normative values, as well as just the economic capacity in this region. I'll talk about South Asia because that is the region I spend working most of my time on. India and South Asia, and that has a very different dynamic in terms of the kind of issues that we talked about. Starting with the language point, I think it's important for all of us to recognize that 80% of the internet today is dominated by 10 languages. Rest of the other languages do not really find a place. And when you look at large countries like India, you also have this dynamic of language fragmentation, because in India itself, which is home to 1 billion plus people, there are 22 languages and also an enormous number of dialects. So language diversity is a highly complex issue, and therefore we all need to make sure that we are investing in the right kind of transliteration tools, and there's a bunch of work which different platform companies are doing, from Google to Facebook to Twitter, in order to enable a lot of the, at the tool level, a lot of the transliteration tools, so that there is a crowd input in terms of that local language, both the capacity and the requirements getting addressed in a hyperlocal manner. This is critical in order for the internet to be truly accessible. So that's one point. The second point, which I spend a lot of my time agonizing over, is the point of just access. Connecting the next billion is not just a slogan in this region. It is a very real need, both in terms of real access and as well as the quality of internet which people get. Most of the region is connected to the internet based on 2G networks, which, as everybody sitting in this room cannot even, most people in this region cannot even imagine today how a 2G network looks or feels like. But that is the reality on the ground for millions of people. That is the only access which people are getting in a lot of these countries. So I think the access question is a very deep and real question, which is an urgent question which needs to be addressed. And there are a whole lot of policy instruments which are currently up for debate and being worked on, but which requires larger participation. It's a bit of a chicken and egg situation, because you will not get participation unless you promote access, and at the same time you cannot promote access because there are these bottlenecks. So for instance, in our region, what has become very important is to look at spectrum auctions in a way where you're just not looking at the reserve price in order to roll out communications infrastructure, but also looking at how you're designing your auctions should also include as a parameter, how do you include rollout obligations, so that there is both the play of the rollout obligations on the operator, as well as making sure that a certain kind of auction bid price is met, which governments have a necessity and a priority to recoup from their respective markets or countries. The second point is sharing of active promotion of sharing of passive infrastructure. There is also this phenomena in our region that there is not active sharing of infrastructure, and therefore we need to look at models where these exist and make sure that those kind of models get promoted. The third element is really to look at how do you reduce the cost of data, which is at a prohibitive level in this region, which is also a gating factor in terms of more and more people not being able to come on the internet. And therefore, there is something to be said about the need for having innovative business arrangements which support things like zero rating for first-time users, to be able to get more and more people connected to the internet. That's one aspect. Connected to the high cost of the data is also another very important socio-cultural dynamic which is in our region, which is very important to understand and appreciate, which is that in this region, if I have constraints in terms of my economic capacity, and if I have a son and a daughter, and if I acquire a data plan, I'm going to give that data plan to my son and not to my daughter. So it is creating a kind of an inequity because of the values which exist in a lot of these societies, which is not sustainable. As a consequence of that, in a lot of these countries, what you see when you look at the internet statistics, for example, in India, for example, only 25% of the women are on internet. There are about 300 million people who are connected to the internet, but only 25% of those are women. And then that leads to its own complications, because you have lesser women on the internet, they have lesser voice, the kind of then other activities which you see where women get targeted, whether from hate speech to misogyny, it just requires a different flavor. Recently in Pakistan, we had a case of a girl who became a victim to honor killing because of expressing herself in a particular way on social media. So there are these very real concerns that lack of representation of women on the internet causes, and we need to be mindful. We need to be mindful of all of these elements. This is not merely a question which is academic in nature, like what happens if more people don't get on the internet. Real harm happens. I think we need to understand that. Like there's real harm which is happening if women are not getting on the internet in higher numbers. So I think the connectivity problem is a problem which needs to be solved very urgently. There is a rapid incentivization which needs to be put out in terms of both spectrum reforms, reduction of connectivity taxes, promotion of innovative business arrangements like zero rating, which help in getting more women online and more people online. And then there is a huge need to push on language localization, because a lot of these people are going to be expressing themselves in their own local language. Those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Anki. So with that, we'd like to have the breakout session. Can I get the lights to be on? So this is what I think we're going to do. Can I have the room divided into 3? So we have this side, group 1, group 2 in the middle. I'm just going to make it very simple. Right, sure. Okay, let this group be A. Okay, I mean, since we have three sides, so A, B, and C. That includes everybody on the table. Okay, except this table. Okay, because you're gonna roam around, and some of you are gonna take the groups. So A, B, and C. All right, let's take 20 minutes because I want to give the speakers, the panelists, a chance to round up and to say what they need to say as well, and to reflect your views. So 3:05, we get back together at the table. Right, and if you feel like you have something to contribute in a different area from what we have assigned, feel free to move around. Okay, but for now, A, B, and C. Okay, facilitators, please. The flip chart is there, it's just a whiteboard, so you can use those.
So just to reconfirm, you're forcing people to join the group, right? There's no choice here. and there's also infrastructure that's built on top of the government. And well, the thing of course, private sector infrastructure is relatively faster because there's a requirement in order to, because they're built in the private sector, their access to the infrastructure is limited to the infrastructure. Whereas government infrastructure, the Philippines, there was an attempt to build a national broadband network by the government, but it was halted due to allegations about corruption that was involved in the hard tax. So, but there is the promise of government infrastructure is that this will remain accessible to everybody, whether big or small players of the industry. But because of the fears that there might be about government infrastructure, I guess this is also
Hi, I need everyone to wrap up by about in 3 minutes time. Time flies, I know. Okay, I need everybody to wrap up in 30 seconds time. I really hate to do this. This is the longest 30 seconds. Participation is welcome, but we have some constraints. Okay, can I invite everybody to write your last words? Thank you, and go back to your seats if you wish to, and we'll let the moderators present. Who wants to go first? Raj, I'm looking at you. Okay. Sorry. Okay, Raj. Since yeah, and how should we do this? Should we ask you? Maybe we'll ask you to come in front because everybody's seated this way. Okay, sure.
All right. So a lot of the points we discussed, I think they were covered by our two discussants earlier, Anki and Hong Shui. But you know, we had good participation in the group, so I must say that everyone contributed quite well. So thank you for that. One of the first things that popped out was the East-West, let me call it the divide, in how people interact and engage in public debate or debate at events like this. There's a tendency in this region to be a bit more quiet about things. There's a tendency not to jump to the mic and have a go at whoever was speaking. So that has always been a long-standing issue. And one interesting point that was raised by people in my group was the fact that even within the region, there's sub-regional nuances that exist in how that happens as well. So it's not just the East-West thing, but within the East, there's different nuances as well that we need to be a bit mindful of. One other point that came out quite strongly was technical and policy jargon that's used. If we want to attract new people into the conversation, you know, and the example that I gave was that if you went to any of the sessions today or to the opening, you know, great speeches, good interventions by the panelists, but if you were not from this community, you sort of be scratching your head, I'm not quite sure what that was, and oh, what was that? Okay. You know, there's a lot of jargon that we use. And sometimes we do it by default because it's the manner we speak in. So I think that is an issue. And that's compounded by the fact that if you have people for whom English is not their first language, which is most of this region, as well, they may not have a very good command of English. So that also complicates things as well. Another point raised was about gender stereotypes, particularly from the cultural aspect. As an example, a male member of the family sitting on a computer participating remotely is okay, but if a female from the same family does that, they may have issues because it's not, you know, the male-female divide that exists in terms of the gender stereotypes that comes into play in some cultures in the region. Interpretation and translation of words and terminology. So one of the discussions we had very briefly was the fact that the term multi-stakeholder doesn't actually translate into a lot of the languages in this region. So if a person does not speak English and doesn't understand the context behind what multi-stakeholder means, once they try and translate that to their own language, it becomes even more and more difficult. So that really becomes an issue. And there's a whole bunch of words and terminology that we use which needs to be looked at. And, you know, and as someone said in my group, that the word doesn't even exist. We can't even make something up to describe it. So that becomes an issue. And if it's a language spoken by literally tens of millions of people, then we have some issues there as well. Another point from this region, there's a tendency for private debate rather than public debate. So if someone has a disagreement, you'd rather go and talk about it privately or in a closed room somewhere. You will not do it out in the open like this. And that's really cultural. And it has been in the DNA for generations or centuries, if you like. So you can't just change that that quickly. And I think one example would have been, you know, one other comment was that sometimes people want a formal request or invitation to speak. However, the internet community by default says you can speak whenever you want. Don't need to ask permission. Just get up to the mic and have a go. But that does not work culturally in a large part of the region. So perhaps being a bit more explicit in how we describe how can you participate in the regional IGF. You can do A, B, C, D, B, etc., etc., etc. Instead of saying, please come and participate. So being a bit more explicit in how we do the invitations, perhaps. Another point raised was that, you know, a lot of issues that we talk about, let's say the human rights angle, this is not the only fora that happens in. It happens in many other fora. And there are fragmented discussions which take place, and different groups go to different discussions at different events at different times. And there really is not much in the way of coordination and communication between those groups. For example, the regulators might go and talk about OTTs as an example, but that discussion might not actually happen at a discussion when civil society is talking about access for people in villages, and it is an issue. So that sort of thing came up. Creating wider incentive and passion to participate and contribute, and really this goes to the relevance of the topics under discussion. A person may be in a particular field of work which has nothing to do with the internet per se, but the internet may be an enabler or a tool or utility of some sort that they may use in their daily lives and so on. How do you give them incentive to participate and the passion to remain in the discussions? So that was another question that came up. And then, of course, dovetail that with the fact that there's the cultural issues that we have, the language issues we have, so it gets even a bit more complicated. Where am I? Definitions and common understanding of terminology. So we have, again, a lot of terminology this community uses, the internet community uses. Not everyone has the same understanding of the same terminology. Sometimes even within our group we don't have that. But when you try and bring people from outside our circle into the conversation, having a defined set of definitions of what certain terms mean, what A means, what B means, what C means, may actually help people to be able to contribute to the discussions a bit better. There was also a small discussion on the cost of participation, and one of the questions I raised was, is remote participation a useful tool? And if so, does it work the same way as you would go to a physical meeting? And I think the answer was more or less yes and no. It depends a lot on some of the discussions. So I think it was Adam who said that, it also depends on what the event is. If it's a very specific policy type meeting with a very specific set of outcomes that you need to work towards, sometimes it's okay to work remotely on that. But more general conferences and events, sometimes it's very hard. I think Chet also mentioned that, if you look at how the roundtables and panels are structured, the audience participation part of those roundtables is very limited. At best, it's 10 minutes. My session this morning, I think we didn't even have 2 minutes left for the audience to participate. Because there's so many speakers on the panels and roundtables, each having their 5 minutes of fame, but then taking that into 15 or 20 minutes of fame, because that's what typically happens. People start talking and they don't stop. It's great to hear what panelists speak about, and I think I'm doing the same thing right now, so I should shut up soon. The point is that you want the audience to engage, and I think that's a missing component. So be it remote or in person, both are issues of the same nature. And I think the greatest barrier to today's discussions was Kelvin. Thank you. Because he stopped us from carrying on. So.
I'm sorry. I will let Lishan. Yeah, so Lishan will be touching on sub-theme A. So over to you.
Thanks. So in terms of, just to maybe set the context in terms of what we think of systems and platforms, right? I think naturally people will think of systems and platforms as technological systems and platforms. The way we discussed it as well, the way the discussion went as well was, it goes beyond technological systems and platforms, thinking about platforms for people to get involved in and stuff like that. So just want to set the context for that. We started the discussion in terms of thinking about how people access basically internet, right? Which is in a sense the biggest platform of all. The group felt that at a basic level, and I think this might be related to the group that talks about language and culture, is that actually in terms of literacy, there needs to be basic education. Your basic needs to be kind of like addressed, right? People need to learn how to read and write before they can actually be involved in that process. And as we go along, as governments, as countries develop, the literacy stuff will go in the more advanced stages, right? If you're thinking about a government or regulator or policymaker, they also need to build their own literacy in terms of skill sets, in terms of policy making. What will be a good policy environment for their citizens to get involved in digital governance? How do they set the right rules such that civil society can get involved in, how private sectors can get involved in working partnerships with the ecosystem. Okay, I'm going to talk about the local content stuff in the aspect of access. So once you have that kind of literacy stuff, kind of like figure it out, the other kind of barrier you thought would be, I think that's what Anki talked about in her speech, was about the cost of devices, cost of access, right? We are aware about how it's important that a smartphone, but the cost of access to a smartphone can be prohibitive in some countries, and the cost of broadband can be prohibitive, right? So that's one. But at the same time, even if you're able to solve that, that might drive take up. But at the same time, you need to make sure that when people get online, they have something to read that's relevant to them, which is why we talk about the ability of local content. We think it's a virtual cycle in the sense that once you have access sorted in some ways, it will sort of feed in getting more the community to create the local content, which in turn potentially drive more access solutions. And from there, we kind of led into the discussion on, therefore, on awareness, right? So you think about yourself as users, you get online. One of the biggest barriers is actually, what do I do when I get online? What's the value to me when I think about getting online? So we thought that one area that, in terms of barriers, would be the knowledge of all these platforms. And one of the solutions really to think about it is, how do we make sure that when users get online, they know other platforms they can go to in terms of whether it is training sessions or resources online or what NGOs are doing in communities such that they can themselves build their own literacy and contribute to the internet governance process. At the same time, we also very clearly, our clear view is that when they first get online, they also we shouldn't try to kind of channel them to one or two significant platforms that everyone knows. I think the value of the internet is that it's about diversity, and as we kind of think about access to systems and platforms, we also must make sure there's a diversity in terms of the platforms for users to get access to. And these are not necessarily be platforms as we know today. We've seen a lot of growth for peer-to-peer networks and peer-to-peer platforms. So that should be encouraged as well to kind of let people kind of do something that's more relevant in their community, because they might actually feel that, oh, this platform is more relevant to me in my particular community, and I use that to engage on the internet governance issues. And very importantly, we also talked about the fact that the policy environment is super important. There was a good point made about the fact that, for instance, if you have a not so strong, let's say, competition environment, let's say in the Philippines, you might have what you call a duopoly in a network where you have telcos sitting there not thinking hard about improving their network quality and providing better services to the people. So in terms of the policy environment, the government plays a big role in ensuring, for instance, QoS, quality of service, that if I'm reporting that I'm providing you certain speeds, my actual experience when I'm using your service should be of that speed, right? And also in terms of the investments, government plays a very important role in terms of investing in networks to make sure that networks remain open to citizens for everyone to access. So that's another area we thought is really important. There was a side conversation around thinking hard about in Asia. There are a lot of countries with rather specific what we call geographical challenges. So the Pacific Islands is one of them. The countries in Central Asia, which are landlocked countries with little access to, say, submarine cable stations, is another type of country, sort of barriers to access to systems and platforms. And then we ended the discussion with a pretty interesting one about it. Oh, actually, even if you solve your literacy issue, if you solve your device issues and access issues and policy environment, at the end of the day, people might still not be participating in the whole internet governance process because they're not aware of what's the value, why do they need to participate in the internet governance process. And we had a little kind of discussion and debate about how do we make it relevant for people. And in that sense, there was a suggestion that we need to make sure that institutions, in this case, need to remain open for people to kind of participate in them, but there needs to be actions on our end as well to make sure that we pull in the communities such they remain engaged over time. And I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Li Xin. I'll just pass the mic to Joyce then. And the last part is Team C. Go ahead.
So I'm glad that Li Xin actually ended off with asking, why are we doing the work that we do? Why are we participating in internet governance? And the theme on addressing capacity actually really touches on that. So for our group, we had a very, very good discussion. And we actually came up with quite a number of points. So there is, first of all, we started off with what do we understand of addressing capacity? So what is capacity building? Why do we do it? So we talked about, the usual hit stuff, which is, education, educating people. We talked about knowledge sharing, improving awareness and literacy. And all these are to enable people to be able to participate, to be able to be part of a process. But then as we talked about it, we started thinking more on the softer aspects of why we're addressing capacity. And actually, really what we're looking at is we just want to increase the comfort level of people to participate in what we do, right? We want to make it accessible to people. So there is all this hit knowledge. We want to educate, we want to share information. But the other part of the coin, the other side of the coin is that we want to increase people's comfort level. So we talked about some tangible and intangible tools. I'll just flip the board because we didn't have enough space. Okay, we talked about some things that we do. Unfortunately, it was a little bit ICANN-centric because we had quite a number of participants who are quite familiar with it. So just bear with us for a second. we talked about, how do we make people feel comfortable coming to such meetings where it's very technical, there's a lot of jargon going on. Then we said, we have newcomer sessions. That's something that ICANN does very well. And also for APrIGF, we have Day Zero with the APILP, the leadership program, which is essentially like a newcomer session. It's to teach people what are the technical jargon, information, what is the background to the issues that we're discussing. So these newcomer sessions are a very good way of bringing people into the fold. We also talked about webinars as a good way of getting people to participate, but of course, as we've already talked about in the room, we also, we had problems with, there are some obstacles with time zone. Do we go for the sweet spot time where hopefully as many people can participate as possible across time zones? Do we rotate the time zone? Of course, there are obstacles with language, using native language. So somebody even remarked, here we are in Taipei, but we're all speaking in English, and there are not that many, presentations, of speakers who are speaking in their local language and being translated, for example. So these are really inherent kind of issues that keep coming up. I've already mentioned jargon, which is the use of acronyms, especially in a very technical forum. So for a lay person, it can be very daunting to even take that first step to be part of the whole forum. Okay, and then we also mentioned, so in the APAC hub, and we partner with what we call APRALO, which is the Asia Pacific Regional at Large Organization. That's another acronym. It is also another problem we are talking about. So we do have a webinar that is for capacity building. I won't go into the detail of what they talk about, but it's very issues-based. But at the heart of it, it's to bring people up to speed, build their knowledge about some very basic, essential issues concerning internet governance, ICANN-related issues. So the reason that we raised this was because we thought that it was a very good way of, a very good example where we see some of these problems that surface that I've mentioned before, but at the same time, we find that it's been useful for people to just join us and, be part of that conversation. And then I put here chat. That is a reminder for me. Basically, I shared a story which was, in terms of language issues, for example, in the APAC region, people tend to be a bit shy. They don't want to voice their opinions, even if it is on Adobe Connect, for example. And you ask people, please unmute your phone. You can actually raise your hand and speak. But people are still more comfortable using the chat. So I think it's this kind of cultural sensitivities, that Group B might have mentioned, just understanding that people have that barrier within themselves and not forcing them to overcome it and just provide other ways for them to participate. So the Adobe Connect chat is a very good example that, hey, people do have opinions and they do type it out. They just don't want to say it. Okay, then we also talked about training as a very good way of getting people involved. So this is a more intangible tool of getting people to participate using mentors, the fellowship program. We also have the next generation program in ICANN, which is to educate students and the youths to understand, internet governance issues. And then I think one of our members from CONAC, I think, also mentioned that there is this Asia Pacific Internet Governance Academy that is happening for youths, I think in Seoul next month. So this was something that was raised as part of capacity building. And the reason for having such a fellowship or mentorship program is really about building relationships. So we talked a little bit about how we have fellows, and even in APrIGF, we also have a fellowship program. I'm a buddy myself. I don't see any of my fellows here, unfortunately. But the idea is you want to make people feel comfortable about being in a forum that can be quite difficult, and at the same time, you are hand-holding them along the way and you're guiding them through the process, helping them to meet new people so that the new faces become familiar faces, The idea that doing such a method is actually resource neutral. I found this very interesting because we had a number of conversations, such as, we talked about captioning, live scribing, and we were saying, oh, all these need budget, and there's always these budget issues, but something like having a mentorship or fellowship program is really resource neutral. You just need to have somebody to give that time to spend with somebody else. And of course, one of the criticisms of such a program is that it only captures a small group of people, unfortunately, because there are only that many people to go around. But it's still something that's necessary. And then towards the end, we talked about interpretation, captioning for people with disabilities, and as a segue to that, also live scribing or real-time text. So in terms of talking about diversity, we should also remember that there are people with certain disadvantages, and having captioning or live scribing is very useful for them, even if they have, say, local language, or rather English is not their native language. It's still helpful to them to be able to read what's on screen and to be able to follow the conversation. So that's all I have. Thank you very much. And also thank you to my group. I hope I did you justice.
Thank you, everyone, the moderators, as well as everyone on the floor. I'm mindful of what Raj mentioned, that some panels do not have time for discussion, so I'm giving everyone about 10 minutes for Q&A and for discussion. Please feel free to raise, if you have contributed to some of the points and you feel that what the presenters have not done you justice, feel free to elaborate, or if you want to challenge anybody who is not in your group or you have some questions for them, please feel free to raise it.
Thank you, Kelvin. Actually, I want to do a bit of an advertisement. The very last session today is actually a session that we're inviting everyone to. It's an open mic session, and I hope that now that you've discussed all the barriers and challenges to, making your voice heard and putting yourself forward, that you will come to the open mic and you will actually sort of let us know for our synthesis document. What is sort of been something that's been a burning issue that you think is really important and should be included into our synthesis document? So if we're sort of we're just hoping that we're going to have streams of people coming to the mic because you're all in there. Great, thank you.
Yes, this is Rita from Hong Kong. First of all, I think it's really good that you choose a different format. And I want to draw your attention to a discussion that happens in the International Development Network. And that is this, how did the awful panel discussion become the default format on all international discourses? And that is, I would really like to recommend this article. If you type in awful panel discussion and The Guardian, there's a very long article because we have actually a professional community of facilitators and people who do world cafes, knowledge cafes, and so on, who have a whole body of knowledge that we don't tap into, But this, I go to many international conferences, and I think really panel is like the default, but panel is really not good for learning, and it's not good for sharing knowledge. It's not good for anything, but it's just good for a few people having their 5-minute slot, Yeah, thanks. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Saeed from Afghanistan. Lee did a good job in leading our discussions. I'm not pointing out what I'm going to make a comment on. In terms of capacity building, we have talked about logistics in terms of enabling people to come on to these events. There are visa challenges, embassies not being able, to help out individuals, and financial issues. But apart from that, coming from a war zone country, it's a lot difficult for international organizations to go into regions like Kabul or Syria or other parts of the world and then engage them in discussions like this. So what I proposed, and I also am working with the APrIGF committee on that, is to have a buddy system. and the buddy system not in terms of individuals but in terms of countries. Like if I come from Afghanistan, it's more easier for me to travel to Pakistan or India or Dubai than travel all the way to Taiwan or Brazil or somewhere. So a buddy system for a smaller regional events would help out the region a lot more than in terms of comparing that to me coming into Taiwan or Brazil or somewhere else in Europe, where I might not get visa, I might have some other financial challenges. So this is something that we need to focus on. If we cannot do more national IGFs or national initiatives in that particular country, or taking individuals out of that country and bringing them here in forums like this, is perhaps smaller regional focus. If not, if we don't call it a regional focus, but national focus, let's say an Indian national event where a buddy country will be allowed to participate more openly than in forums like this. Thank you.
Anybody else? Well, if not, Adam, you want to have the last word?
Only thank you very much. I think one of the things that I can take away as a positive thing to try and do is create some sort of welcome document out of this. I was very interested in the comment that even a very basic term like multi-stakeholder may not be clearly understood. What does it actually mean? We're all very experienced at it now, but people are not necessarily. So a welcome document that may say, this is what we want you to do, and we welcome your contributions, I suppose, is the goal. But thank you very much for joining the meeting today. And yeah, thank you. And